Hey, Emma.
Yes, Madelyn.
What do you call it when you get into an argument with one of your friends about the name of a long-running RPG series that isn't really representative of the RPG series at this point, and not only is the thing that you call it kind of referencing the name of that series, but it's also the last argument that you ever have?
What do you call it?
Final fight! Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your Dread Wolf host, Madelyn.
I'm your oh my car host, Emma.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. This week we're talking about Final Fight, and we're talking about Dragon Age: The Veilguard, which is an RPG with a title that got silly. I was talking about Final Fantasy, but I thought that there was like a reference there.
Yeah.
Pretty good joke.
Pretty good joke.
You hear that, listeners?
I mean, I didn't absorb half of what you said, so
That's the
I
best
assume
joke.
it must be good.
It just scrolled right onto your head.
Yep.
Speaking of that, let's talk about Final Fight.
Yeah.
The Final Fight. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up video game, believe it or not.
Yeah.
From Capcom, first released in arcades in, I think, I meant to type 1989.
Yes. What did you type?
In?
It started as an idea for a follow-up to the original Street Fighter, so its original code name was Street Fighter 1989.
Yeah.
So, that's pretty easy to remember.
I mean, yes, but I had not gotten to the part, it's like 6 bullets down where I write for myself. Originally developed as a sequel to Street Fighter. Yeah, it was gonna be, and they did eventually make a sequel to Street Fighter, but everybody loved Double Dragon. New Double Dragon coming.
New Double Dragon coming. I don't remember who makes that. I didn't absorb
Taito, originally. Are they still around?
I don't know.
Anyway.
We're not talking about Double Dragon
yet. It's not
yet.
a Double Dragon episode. That's DD. This is FF, Final Fight.
Exactly.
But yeah, they were originally making, Street Fighter. And then they were like, oh, everybody loves a side-scrolling beat-em-up. How about we make Street Fighter 1989 a side-scrolling beat-em-up? And then people played it and they were like, this isn't Street Fighter.
Yeah.
So they came up with a new name.
Yep, basically. It is still set in the Street Fighter universe, though.
Yes.
The main characters... Well, I guess the Hagar does not come to Street Fighter.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I think it is just Cody and Guy who have made the crossover to the mainline series at points.
There wouldn't be a mayor. Like, he would shut down the street fights. Hagar. Wouldn't make sense. That's not what he stands for.
Apparently it is.
Okay, you're right. Fair enough. Actually, another fun fact that I read in an interview is, part of the reason that they pivoted to making this instead of Street Fighter 2 was that everybody liked Double Dragon, but apparently also there was a chip shortage.
Aha! Makes sense.
And they were like, oh, the chips we need for the NES, because they were like, the original Street Fighter used 48 megabytes for the graphics alone. And they only had 32 megabyte chips, so we knew we couldn't make Street Fighter 2. So we had to do something else.
I mean, I was reading about, the original Street Fighter was, not the best fighting game.
Yeah.
But was certainly the prettiest at the time. So it makes sense that they...
48 whole megabytes.
48 whole megabytes for its graphics, yeah.
Anyway, Final Fight is not Street Fighter. It's Final Fight. And guess what, babies? Wikipedia Greatest Games of All Times list.
Yeah.
Entry here. Alongside Populous, Prince of Persia, and SimCity in 1989.
Mm-hmm.
So, I haven't heard of Populous, to be honest.
Me neither.
Apparently it's the first God game.
Maybe you'll go in the hat one day.
Maybe it will. But anyway, yes. Love when a Wikipedia Greatest Game of All Time appears. The game is set in Metro City. Love living in Metro City.
Yeah.
Where I live.
It's not actually the silliest origin for a setting name that we'll talk about today.
It's not. But Metro City, aka fake New York. Where, Hagar, he's the mayor.
Yep.
All good cities have a... He's probably... Can Hagar be the mayor? Can we get him to do the next perp walk in New York City?
Yeah.
That felt like something out of Street Fighter. Anyway. So Mike Hagar, he's the mayor of Metro City. He ran on cleaning up the town because Metro City is just beset with crime.
Yeah, what's the gang's name? Wild Gear gang?
Mad Gear.
Mad Gear gang. Of course.
Mad funny.
Named
Gear
after
gang.
the Mad Gear series from Capcom.
That's right. Exactly. So he's successfully mostly cleaned up the town, except that the Mad Gear gang is still a thorn in his side. And more specifically, they are a thorn in his side that would like to bribe him to do their bidding or whatever. He says no, and they say, that's too bad. We've kidnapped your daughter.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Yes, Jessica.
And Hagar is understandably upset about this. And so he calls in his daughter's boyfriend, Cody.
Yep.
And Guy,
his sparring partner,
his
who's
American
a ninja. Yeah.
His American Ninja Warrior.
Yep.
And he's like, buddies, take him out. And they do.
Well, all of them do. Hagar's
there
rips
too.
off
You're right,
his shirt because he used to be a pro wrestler.
Yes.
And he has reverted back to those times in the desire to save his daughter.
Yes.
Of course.
Fun fact, the reason that there is a ninja is that the Capcom president at this time thought that Americans were really into ninjas and dinosaurs.
Yeah. There's also, I read a few things that's just like, Capcom, like, they just put a ninja in everything.
They have to have a ninja.
It was just like a company mandated ninja has to feature in their games.
So that's where Guy comes from. Sort of ironically, he then like gets cut from some of the home releases in the States.
Well, yeah, so the arcade release had 3 playable characters and 2-person mode.
Yeah.
So you could choose between Hagar, Cody, or Guy. You could play through stages with a friend, so on. When it came to the SNES a year later, it is not as powerful as an arcade cabinet.
Who would have guessed?
So they ended up cutting Guy out of it, and it's only single player, so you can only choose between Cody and Hagar also. Yeah. Until
Guy Edition.
They released the Guy Edition.
Final Fight Guy.
Final Fight Guy. Which he replaces Cody, which is such a funny concept to me.
I know. It's
that
like your girlfriend.
Hey, your girlfriend's kidnapped. Can you send your ninja friend? I think he'd be better.
Not you.
I don't want you.
I hate you.
I just think your ninja friend would really help me out in this situation. Yeah. But in the West, extremely funny, rental exclusive to Blockbuster. You can only rent it from Blockbuster if you want the super special Final Fight Guy edition.
Do you think you can still rent it from the one Blockbuster that's left?
I don't know. I hope so.
I'll have to call him. Call him up and see. Be like, do you have Final Fight Guy?
Yeah.
Can I get a copy? Anyway, it's a side-scrolling beat 'em up. You know what that is, right, listeners? You walk from side to side.
Yeah.
You beat 'em up.
You can go up and down in this one.
True. And people really liked Final Fight, partially because they're big boys.
Yes.
Like they were like, the sprites were like bigger than in other games.
Yes,
and this was
the
like
camera is closer to the action.
Huge and
usually.
Cool.
Yeah.
The design ethos, apparently, which hilarious, just great. Could we get back to design ethos that's like that simply distilled? But also just apparently had like very good collision and like felt good to play. Yeah. And like in that sense has aged pretty well. I mean, it's a game from 1989. It's not gonna not feel like an arcade game from 1989, but everything I like was reading to and watching about it was like, nah, like this kind of holds up. If you like know what it is, this holds up. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think most of the modern ports or ways that you can play it aren't great. Yes. Either in terms of visuals or any other number of things, but
But in theory, if you could just grab it out of that arcade, it would hold up.
The Sega CD version apparently also added back a lot of the stuff that had gotten cut in the SNES one, because the CD, I assume.
Sure. The megabytes.
Yes, the megabytes that they could put onto it.
The game was a big commercial success, although I was so confused. Money doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah?
One of the things about it being a commercial success or its commercial performance was like the cabinets were averaging like $200 a month in coins. I was like, that doesn't sound like a lot to me. I know it's the 80s. That still doesn't sound like a lot. But I'd have to do like an inflation calculator, I guess.
Yeah.
Anyway, people liked it.
Also, there were a lot of cabinets back then.
No, of course there were. I don't mean to say that every cabinet had to be pulling $100,000. I was just like...
I mean, thinking about arcades as they existed,
Sure.
especially in Japan back then, versus how arcades exist now, which is not really.
That is very correct. There were some fun influences for this game that I liked. I mean, obvious ones, right? Like, they're like ruffians in New York beating them up. So, like, obviously they were influenced by, like, Streets of Fire and those kinds of games. Although, in some early interviews, they were like, we've never heard of that movie.
I didn't read those
They
ones.
then later on go on to be like, of course that was an influence. But there's a few, like, early ones where they're like, no. Like, just a coincidence.
I read an interview on the Capcom site with
me too.
Akiman and Akira Nishitani, like, saying they had, like, a 3-monitor setup, and they would watch, like, two
just, like,
films
mainlining these films
at the same time while working, which, like, I guess you're just taking in the vibes, mostly, right? But still, very content sludge.
Look, it's obvious, like, I didn't internalize the president at the time's name of Capcom.
Yeah.
Obvious that this man is a little unhinged, right? So, like, they were like, the president told us to watch them all. So, like, we did.
Yeah.
And it just sounds like a situation where you gotta be like, all right, boss, there's a ninja. All right, boss, I watched 40 movies.
Yeah.
Thanks, boss.
But I saw specifically Streets of Fire and Hard Times.
Yes.
Cited as inspirations.
Yes.
And then character-wise, you know, you got Guy the Ninja, of course. Right. Cody is very, like, James Dean sort of person.
And then
Hagar, of course inspired by professional wrestlers, which you'll see through the villains as well.
Right.
And also Jean Valjean.
From Les Miserables.
From Les Miserables. Which, honestly, I see it.
Sure.
I do.
No, I do too. I get it.
I heard that. I was like, I see it. I understand.
In talking about it, though, it really was... And I feel like there are interviews with Japanese devs that are like this vibe all the time. They're like, our buddy in the office was really into Les Miserables at that time, so he kind of worked it in.
I think every developer in Japan just goes through a phase where they really like Les Miserables.
They hear One Day More and something just unlocks.
Something unlocks. Maybe every developer, you know, to be fair.
Yeah. Like, it's fair.
It's fair.
Yeah. What is that song called? The awesome one with him and Javert, where they sing in Counterpoint. The confrontation.
Yeah.
Oh, they hear the confrontation and they're like, that's it, baby.
I think that an interpretation of Les Mis where Jean Valjean is like a former pro wrestler is something.
That's sick. Yeah, who is Jean Valjean, like, before the bread thing? We don't really know.
Yeah.
He could be a former pro wrestler in, like, what is it, like 1790s Paris?
Well, that's what I'm saying, reinterpretation, right?
Yeah. No.
It's like you're setting Les Mis at a different time period.
Dope. That'd be so sick. It's a shame that these guys don't get, like, a musical number.
Yeah.
Like, they're basically the boys.
Yeah.
This is basically, it's really bad that I don't remember their names anymore.
Who?
The main guy and his buddy who dies. Spoilers.
In Les Mis?
Yeah. Not Jean Valjean, the young ones.
Marius
and
Angela.
Yeah.
Angela.
No, thank you. That's basically who they are.
Which one's the ninja?
Angela. Absolutely. Marius is the one with a girlfriend.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's basically all Les Mis.
Cody does have, like, a little edge to him, though, that develops as his characters in more things, where it's kind of implied that, like, yeah, he's going to save Jessica, but, like, it's kind of just an excuse
He likes to punch.
He really likes street fighting.
Yeah.
And would rather do that really than anything else.
Why is that such a theme of beat 'em ups?
Is it?
Isn't that the whole arc of Yakuza? Ultimately, isn't Kiryu's whole arc just like in the end he really likes punching guys?
Is Yakuza? I guess it's a beat 'em up. It's a 3D beat 'em up though. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's again Madeline. We're doing the Madeline trends again.
Yeah.
I feel like you need a few more examples.
I like when people beat 'em up.
I feel like you
Who
need a
doesn't
few
like
more
to beat 'em
examples
up?
besides just Kiryu
Yeah.
to prove this trend to me.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. Thank you for calling me out so aggressively. It's fine. I'm gonna do a how many games make Les Mis references spreadsheet too. Anyway. The other characters, the villains, I guess are pro wrestling, but they're named after 80s rock musicians.
Yes. No, they just, some draw inspiration from, like, pro wrestling, some are rock musicians, some are just, like, the style of Hollywood actresses at the time of, like, Poison.
Yeah. Poison. Weird situation there.
Was it just on the Western release that they were changed to, like, male sprites?
Yes, they got replaced by men in the West. And then in the original release, there's the really questionable choice to be like, I don't know, how do we get people to feel okay beating up women? And the choice they came to was, let's say these women are trans. So...
This is kind of the choice Yakuza 0 also made.
True.
So we're seeing a trend here.
Yes.
Again. A very far apart trend in that case,
yes,
actually.
I mean, bold to have trans representation at all in 1989, I guess. Even in a really horrifying and problematic way.
It's also kind of wild, because, like, did the original Street Fighter not have any female fighters? That can't be right. Like,
yeah,
Chun-Li is, like, an original, isn't she?
I thought so.
Wild.
Yeah, just somebody got real nervous.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the West, they're just guys. With totally different names.
Yes. Yeah.
Billy and Sid.
Yes.
So, R.I.P. Poison.
Well, she's still around.
I know, but R.I.P. original Poison. You will be missed. But yeah, they're all like, there's like Axel and Slash and like all of these like wild, that's also like a funny thing in some of these arcade games. They're like, let's name them after musicians, let's name them after actors all the time. I feel like I don't have evidence for this, but I remember it from other episodes that this would happen. They get named after musicians.
Yeah.
I remember it.
Well, one of the, I can't remember if it's the Digital Foundry or the Matt McMuscles one that I watched on Final Fight, but they're talking about, like, VHS tapes. And that's part of the reason why, like, they were watching these American movies and stuff, was it was actually coming over there, right? In a way that they could watch conveniently.
Yeah.
And so that's why you get a lot of, like, these more American influences, because films and media and stuff are actually, like, getting over there in a physical home media type form.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting perspective on it.
That is interesting. I had never thought about it that way. It's just like cultural osmosis, but of course there's no internet, so like...
Yeah.
So Final Fight got a few sequels, right, for the SNES in 1993 and 1995, and there was a 3D sequel for the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox in 2006. There's also like a chibi parody.
Yes,
Just
I loved
so
Mighty Final Fight.
Weird.
Or whatever.
Hilarious.
It
Yes,
was
Mighty
very
Final
cute.
Fight.
It's very cute looking.
Can't fault it. Good for them. But it's like pretty much disappeared. And by disappeared, I mean they've been absorbed into Street Fighter.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah, Final Fight 2 was like Hagar. So, okay. So, Guy's fiance and grandfather,
Not the same person.
one of those two.
Okay.
Guy's fiance and one of her male upper relatives
Okay.
have been kidnapped because the Wild Gear Gang, Mad Gear Gang has somehow spread across the world despite, like, being defeated in Final Fight 1. So
Crazy.
whatever. And the younger sister of Guy's fiance calls Hagar to say, please help me. These people have been kidnapped.
Yeah.
And also this random ninja guy, Carlos, has sworn to protect Hagar. And so he's coming along for the ride. You know
Carlos the ninja.
You know who's not? Guy.
Man, Guy, get out of here.
Guy's somewhere. And Cody's on vacation with Jessica, apparently. So it's
That's
Hagar,
so crazy.
Carlos, I can't remember the girl's name. Mai, maybe?
I don't remember. Doesn't matter.
And so it's those three on, like, a jet-setting adventure
Sure.
to save Mai's sister and upper male relative. And then Final Fight 3 takes characters from another series, which I can't remember what it is, but another series that was like, we're not gonna make these anymore,
Yeah.
let's just absorb them into Final Fight. So you get, like, 2 characters from that series, and then Hagar and Guy.
Guy.
Guy's back
Yeah.
from wherever he was.
Wild.
You can get a secret ending in the second one where Guy calls you and is like, thanks. And that's
Saving my girl.
it. Yeah, thanks for that.
That was cool.
And then in Final Fight Streetwise is, like, about the 3D one. I think, like, the latest release, basically. Is about, like, Cody's younger brother who feels, like, overshadowed by him. It's much sort of grittier and darker in tone, and it hasn't aged well in a lot of ways. And there's, like, a whole arc where, like, Cody goes to prison,
Yikes.
possibly because of something Guy did, and he took the fall for it.
No!
But there's a while where his look is like he's got handcuffs, and he's in a prison uniform, and he fights with his legs, essentially.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Love when characters learn to kick.
Yeah. So there's a whole drama going on in there, you know. Hagar's fine, I think. He's not the mayor anymore by the time of Streetwise.
Well, term limited.
Eventually Cody becomes the mayor, I think.
Oh, okay, cool.
There's always a surprising amount of stuff happening in, like, these fighting game adjacent games, you know?
Oh, they've got lore.
I know.
Yeah.
Always a surprising amount of stuff going on.
Oh, that's gonna be... Sorry, I was just like... I had the thought, oh, like, we should have a BioWare fighting game. It's coming, baby! Stay tuned!
And then, also, in the Street Fighter anime, in Season 2, they do have an episode called Final Fight, where...
The final fighters are there.
They check in with Cody and Guy, yeah.
There was some, like, hopeful crying online that I was reading that was like, oh, like, Metro City was, like, really featured in Street Fighter 6, right? Like, maybe that means that it's coming. But it's not. Why would it?
Well...
I mean, I don't know. Side-scrollers are kind of in.
With the, Capcom has said... Because they just announced new entries for Okami and
That's crazy, by the way.
and Onimusha.
I actually have to finish Okami.
Which we've also talked about Onimusha on the show, but they announced a new entry for that too at the Game Awards. And have said that in addition to making new titles, they're actively interested in reviving dormant IPs right now.
Ooh.
Which they have a lot of IPs, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's not Final Fight, you know?
Right. It could be Final Fight.
So it could be that.
Well, we can all keep our fingers crossed. Emma, do you want to close this part of the podcast with a great censorship tidbit?
Oh, yeah. In some parts of the level in the original Final Fight, you can destroy a car that belongs to the evil gang, right?
Yeah.
And then the gang member will come out and see the car and go, oh my god!
As you would.
Yeah. But when being moved, I'm not clear if it was just all versions that were on the SNES or specifically the Western version. But this was at the time when Nintendo had a lot of rules about how to present stuff. So there was a lot of changes, like in the Japanese one, Poison doesn't have a a belly shirt anymore.
Yeah.
She just has a tank top. So,
No
stuff like
bellies.
that. But specifically at the time, and I remember we've talked about this before, is they
Yeah.
really didn't want you to mention religion.
There cannot be God.
Yes, you really are not supposed to mention God. So instead, they would come out and they would fall to the ground and they would go, "Oh my car," which arguably better,
So,
honestly.
like an improvement. 100%. Tells us so much more about the Mad Gears gang. Or the Wild Gears gang, if you're Emma.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep calling them that, probably.
Well, should we make the choice to move on to Dragon Age here?
Yes.
Alright. Dragon Age the Veilguard. Action RPG. From BioWare. Published by EA. Released on Halloween. For PlayStation 5, Windows, and the Xboxes. It's the 4th game in the series, but the first in a decade.
Yes.
Since Inquisition.
Every time I typed this into Google, it was like, you don't have to type the.
Yeah.
Just Dragon Age Veilguard.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, this, we can talk a little bit about the game before we go into, like, the whole development history of the game.
Oh, boy.
And BioWare's situation.
What a mess.
But this version of the game was originally announced as, Dragon Age Dreadwolf.
Yes.
Like, officially.
Yeah.
And then in the summer, like June of this year, they announced that they were changing it to Dragon Age the Veilguard to, like, more accurately reflect the focus of the game. Because, like, Dreadwolf is specifically referring to, like, an antagonistic force from Dragon Age. And the Veilguard is about focusing on, like, your team and party and companions.
Who are, like, fighting the Dreadwolf.
Yes.
But...
So it does seem like I understand, like, the rationale. It does seem like the game itself is, yes, more focused on, like, the team dynamic than it really is on, like, Dreadwolf.
Yeah.
But it is not a great name.
I want to quote IGN here.
Yeah.
It's hilarious that no one says the word Veilguard out loud across the 100 hours I played of this dialogue-packed campaign, exposing a last-minute marketing pivot for what it was. They all go on to be like, they say Dreadwolf all the time. So, you know, take that as you will.
Yeah, I guess so.
But yes, in this game, so, right, like, Dragon Age, big ol' RPG. Anthology RPG.
Classic BioWare RPG.
Very classic. And, you know, if you're familiar with BioWare, you're familiar then that it is, like, uses their ethos of choices that follow you across the series. That's, like, the BioWare defining trait.
Yes. Dragon Age, for what it's worth, is slightly different. It has been slightly different from something like Mass Effect.
Right.
In that, like, Mass Effect 1 through 3...
It's a trilogy.
It's a trilogy. You are following the same character. You're in, like, it follows immediately after from one to the other.
Yeah.
The first 3 Dragon Ages, Origins, 2, and Inquisition, they all have new characters. Like, your choices carry through, but they aren't, like, immediate, like, oh, we're following up immediately from the events.
It's not one connected story. I mean,
the last
it is one connected story. It's not like one arc.
Yes. The Veilguard is interesting in that it is both the most direct sequel that they have made and also the one that attempts to have the most clean break from the past.
Which, if your ears are going, ruh-roh, interesting.
It is definitely a challenging tightrope that they laid out for themselves to walk. But unfortunately, seems like they sort of wrote themselves into a corner with it, with a lot of ways.
Yeah.
In that they couldn't not follow up, like, the events of Inquisition in terms of where it left it, but also it had been, like, 10 years.
Yeah, the development, again, we won't go to that.
And the game has to sell copies.
Yeah. Well, the development history of it certainly didn't help.
Yes,
right? Like,
that too.
Obviously, the intention here was not to take a 10-year gap.
Yes.
And that, in any kind of sequel situation, puts you in a difficult position.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you can, even a game coming out 4 years later, you can't necessarily trust that people remember what happened, or that, like, most of your players have played the previous games. But, like, 10 years later?
Yeah.
That's, like, PS3, right?
Yes. Even if they have played it, what do they remember?
Yeah.
How are
And,
they
like,
transferring?
Can I still play it? Yeah, exactly.
How are they transferring their saves?
Right. So anyway, to try to sum up the story here a little bit.
Madelyn's lore corner,
Oh,
go!
good luck to me. Okay, so you play as a character called Rook, and you, like, work with this guy called Varric, who is, like, a Dragon Age mainstay type character. And so you have been looking for Solus, who, like, in Dragon Age Inquisition, Dragon Age, really lore-heavy series.
Yes.
Right? So I'm really doing the bird's eye view here. A lot of lore in Dragon Age. But Solus was, like, your buddy in Dragon Age Inquisition.
Yes.
Right? Good guy, your buddy, whatever.
Well,
right? Okay.
The good guy made, like, throughout the whole thing, they're a lot meaner in the previous Dragon Ages, is the sort of vibe I got. But yeah.
Overall, a man on your side.
Yes. Yeah.
A man, force of good, perhaps.
Yes.
But then in the DLC, it's revealed that Solus is actually, like, an evil god, basically, an elven mischief god.
Yeah,
not evil. Sorry, evil was a little too strong. He's a trickster god, and, like, that's crazy. That was, like, a crazy cliffhanger reveal.
Yeah,
and we sat on that cliffhanger reveal for a decade.
There was a bit of DLC for Inquisition that sort of expanded that he wants to, like, drop the veil, which is, like, a magical sort of force thing that separates some stuff, and essentially give elves back their immortality, is what I got from it.
Yeah. So you're Rook, you're looking for Solus. You've been looking for him because, like, you know he's going to do this thing with the veil, and, like, in doing that, it's not, like, just he's enfranchising the elves or whatever, empowering the elves. It's also going to let loose some bad stuff.
Yes.
There's, like, some bad gods who have been imprisoned behind the veil.
Well, that's why Varric is looking for him.
Right.
You are just, at the beginning, have been hired to show him around your country. Yeah. Because it's a different area of, Thetis. Thetis?
Sure.
The D, right?
Yeah.
Than the games have been set in previously.
Yeah.
So you're not really involved in this until the bad stuff happens.
Exactly. So, you know, oops, bad stuff does happen, though.
Yes. So essentially Solus wasn't doing, like, what he said he was going to do then. He was doing something, like, weird with these other two gods.
Yeah.
Essentially trying to keep them contained.
Yes.
And you and Varric sort of accidentally mess up his stuff with this.
Whoops.
And inadvertently release these gods across the country, the continent, and Solus ends up kind of trapped behind the veil, only sort of able to barely talk to you.
Yeah.
And that's how Rook gets involved in this sort of conflict, somewhat convolutedly.
Yeah. And then you do a lot of stuff with your buddies.
Yes, you put together a team.
When did Baldur's Gate come out? Last summer, year. 2023.
Well, I mean, it was out for a while before that.
Oh, you're right.
For what it's worth, the initial pitch for this sounds pretty similar to the vibes of this one.
Sure.
So even in a project restart, the vibes have not changed that much.
That's fair.
Also, Baldur's Gate is just Dungeons and Dragons.
I know.
I feel like I have to say.
I'm not saying the idea is so unique. I'm just saying, look, as we are about to get into, this game went through a lot of transformations and identities, and also just, like, the history of, like, Dragon Age as a series at BioWare in general seems to be these games change a lot in development. So
also, Dragon Age is, like, each entry in Dragon Age is pretty fundamentally different from each other in terms of combat style.
Yes, this one is real time.
Yes, this one is real time. The first one was, like, top down stuff. Inquisition was open world. Like, they change pretty, like, everyone has a different main character. Everyone has different combat styles, so there's not a lot of consistency across the series.
Sure.
But I will say, I know you're saying, like, Baldur's Gate, but Baldur's Gate is actually, like, from classic BioWare
No, I know.
RPGs, right? It's just like a circular type thing.
Yeah. I just saw at least several articles suggest that the pivot to marketing it focused on, like, your party feels like explicitly acknowledging the, like, runaway hit of Baldur's Gate.
Maybe.
I mean,
I don't know.
It's many things, of course.
From what I've read, it is a more character-focused game than some of the others have been, in that, not that the others weren't character-focused, but that it's more personal.
Mm.
You make a lot of more smaller decisions than you do, like, big world-changing ones, which for some people is a negative. I read some that was like, oh, I don't feel like I'm having as much of an impact in this one as I did. And some that was like, well, the other ones, like, summed up really nuanced conflicts into, like, one or the other.
Yeah.
That wasn't very compelling all the time anyway. So I don't mind these more smaller choices.
Sure.
So a little bit of both sides from that.
Yeah.
So even if the marketing changed to do that, I do think it's from, like, that's just the way the game developed.
Yes.
As well.
So do we want to talk about the trouble development? Do we want to talk about the trouble of trying to make choices in games? You know, like, carry over choices in games like this? What kind of trouble are we getting up to
I mean,
here?
we might as well go chronologically.
Okay.
I read there was a Kotaku article from Jason Schreier in
Yes.
2019.
Which is not even, it's only halfway through.
Yes. Which was mostly like, oh, I picked up these scraps while I was doing my big article on Anthem.
Yeah.
Which, if you don't
R.I.P.
remember Anthem, yeah.
You don't.
You don't. Which, Inquisition, when it came out, struggled a lot from its multi-platform launch. It had a multiplayer mode. Frostbite still sucks, the engine that BioWare uses. And of course there's the big BioWare magic crunch on it. And so at the time they started work on something called Joplin, which is the code name inside. Again, like I said, the description there was like, you're putting a team, sort of heisty type stuff. Very similar vibes to what this game ended up being.
And, like, for context there too, right? We're about to tell this whole, like, very troubled development story. It's not like the Dragon Age games before that were, like, smooth sailing, sunny skies.
Inquisition came out very rough on launch. Yeah. But also at the time they were making Mass Effect Andromeda.
Yeah.
The follow-up to Mass Effect 3. So in 2016, they got, a lot of the team got moved to Andromeda, while like a skeleton crew stayed on Joplin doing, like, the pre-production work.
Yeah.
Andromeda came out. That was a big mess.
Uh-huh.
You can see in the credits, there's a Dragon Age finaling team that's credited. So that didn't go well. People moved back to Joplin. Some people from Andromeda moved to Joplin. Thinking it was going good, but there was this growing concern about Anthem.
Yeah, might not get finished.
It might not get finished. It's really buggy. It's not going well. So in 2017, Joplin was fully canceled, and the team was moved to Anthem to try to clean up the trash fire that was happening there.
And everyone was really bummed about this, because they were like, we learned lessons from Inquisition. We're excited about Joplin. This is gonna be like, we've figured out how to make Dragon Age.
Yes. I always believe people feel that way. I do always take those with a grain of salt.
No, of course it wouldn't have been that way.
I just canceled projects always seem more beautiful.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah.
And then around that time still there is another skeleton crew that started a new project codenamed Morrison that would be built off of Anthem's tools and code base. And by the grace of
Decree of EA.
Would have live service and multiplayer elements.
Nothing says Dragon Age
like live service. I did think the Jason Schreier article offered, like, interesting possibilities that you could do with live service. But this
Yeah.
was when we still had some amount of like, oh, live service can be interesting
Can't
sometimes.
we have Fortnite? Yeah, exactly.
But then in 2021, it was sort of soft rebooted again because off the abject failure of Anthem, EA was like, how about we remove those?
Well, and also they were like, oh, Jedi Fallen Order was pretty good.
Yeah, and also Jedi Fallen Order, yeah. And EA was like, well, why don't you just make a single-player RPG?
How would you make Bioware games?
That also from a Schreier article, although he had moved to Bloomberg by then in 2021.
Paywall.
And then it was officially announced as Dreadwolf, I think, in 2022.
Yeah.
And it developed normally from there, basically, at the normal pace that AAA games take nowadays.
Important to note that throughout this process, as you would expect over a game that took this amount of time, there's a ton of staff turnover.
Yes.
Although, like, really a ton here.
Yes.
And also there were layoffs in the summer of 2023 that affected this team.
Yes.
So basically nobody, like, none of the people who finished working on this game had made a Dragon Age game before,
Yes.
more or less.
I think one of their original executive producer came back as an advisor by the end. But, like, yeah, there was a lot. They got, like, it was, like, 3 different executive producers and 2 different creative directors and, like, production directors and all these different people in leadership changing out. So, honestly, with all that in mind, like, pretty good launch.
No, yeah, sold decently well.
And it's pretty,
Like,
it's
pretty
complete.
Good. Yeah, and, like, got, like, decent critical reaction. We'll talk about some of the, like, is there even really any way you could have solved this critiques?
Yes.
But for the most part, people were like, this is pretty good. Even if some of the sickos were like, I'm not sure if this actually feels like a Dragon Age game to me.
Yes.
But people were like, it's a good RPG.
Unfortunately, it is a game that got hit with the woke content churn. So it can be... I found it difficult when researching this game to figure out... It's always hard with these games to figure out what is, like, legitimate critique and what is just people being like, oh, they're woke and gay or whatever. You know?
Yeah.
You know, something tempting me into getting this game. Okay. So, all the companions are pansexual.
Sure.
They made a specific point to say they're not just player sexual.
Sure.
Right? So, there's a choice being made there. And if you don't romance companions, they can have romances among themselves.
That's cool.
I know, right? That's what I wanted from Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, is them to
like
smooth.
I just wanted to set up the companions with each other.
Yeah.
And they can be out of it.
Yeah.
And so that's very appealing about Dragon
Yes.
Age the Veilguard in how it's set up, in that they can romance with each other or other characters that they meet, depending on, like, the choices that you make or who you romance and stuff. And I find that very fun, you know?
Unfortunately, one of the big critiques that I saw a lot was that the other characters are a little bland.
I saw a lot that was like, I think this is the most solid cast of characters that they've created, so...
Polarizing then, because a lot of the reviews I read were like, they're all too nice, like, you know, I wish they would argue with me more.
I did see a little bit of that. I think it's just down to...
Yeah, what do you want?
What do you want?
Yeah.
You know, there's choices that you make early that, like, sets one of your companions off against you for a while.
Yeah.
So there's still stuff in there. But I did read some stuff they're talking about, like, you can anger them, but we also wanted to write in, like, ways to forgiveness, which I did think was at least an interesting writing goal.
Yeah.
You know? Because sometimes you can, like, permanently piss off companions off what seem like small things. And so it's interesting. It is an interesting goal, and whether or not that's successful is probably going to come down to your perception of things, right? But it is interesting to be like, okay, you can piss them off, but also, like, that relationship can be mended afterwards as well.
That is interesting. I did also see most people like this, but a few reviewers who are like, I don't know about this. The game is very clear when you're making a romantic move.
Yeah.
Which I think you would appreciate.
I would appreciate. Did I tell my I accidentally agreed to like 3 dates in a row?
Yeah, you did.
And kept reloading. In a game. In Baldur's Gate. But I didn't understand that I was agreeing to dates.
Yeah.
And,
which is probably more realistic. But, like...
It didn't let me roleplay that, though.
Yeah. Anyway, this game is very much like... You trying to smooch?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the challenges of being BioWare.
Yes, yeah.
So as we said, right, like, the big BioWare thing, is you make choices in your games, and those choices don't just impact the outcomes within those games, they carry over to some extent from game to game.
Yes. And
in Dragon Age, they've had various ways of doing that throughout. Like, most recently in moving to Inquisition, they had like an app, Dragon Age Keep, where I think you maybe could import your save data too, but instead of doing that, you could also just go through and like input like hundreds of choices that you made in the other game to set up your world. Which is like cool. That's crazy also, but cool. However, as we've talked about on this show before, whenever we talk about anything like this, or this comes up at all, game design is hard. Games are big. And, like, the bigger games get and the more branching paths there are, the more completely unsustainable this kind of, like, design philosophy is.
Yes.
And this game hit up against that pretty hard.
Yes.
So first of all you can carry over in this game, which is in some ways, like, smart, given that there is a 10-year gap.
Yes.
And given that the ability, and they talk about this a lot, they're like, we really don't want to contradict things, like, we really wanted to just do what we could, although there are plenty of reviews from sickos who are like, but you didn't. Sickos, like, lovingly, right? Yeah. But here in this game, just, like, in your, like, character creator, so the Inquisitor, who is the lead character from Dragon Age Inquisition,
yes,
appears in this game, and you can, like, design the Inquisitor to look like your Inquisitor.
Yes.
Cool. And as part of that, you also get to say, like, what of these 3 choices, what choices do you want to have made, right? Who did you romance? What happened with the Inquisition? Some other thing.
Was it the background of your Inquisitor?
Oh, I think you get to choose that too. But, like, I think you also got to choose something with, like, what did you do with, how did you respond to Solus?
Oh, right. What do you want to do with Solus? Yeah.
And that's it. That's all that carries over. And they make the excuse, too, that it's, like, you're in a different part of the region. So, like, a lot of the stuff that was happening down there isn't really relevant here.
Yeah.
And they've also created, like, ways for these characters who are from previous games, who are then part of this game, to be here that are theoretically compatible with whatever could have happened to them. But this was, like, I mean, as you mentioned, this game is trying to do a weird thing of a big continuation of a huge cliffhanger while also being welcoming to new players into a universe that is, like, deeply, deeply lore-y. And that's, like, just more or less impossible. And also carrying on this legacy of, like, you've been shaping this world.
Yeah.
Right? And that's just impossible. There's no way to do it.
Yeah.
And so they more or less didn't try.
Yeah.
And people didn't love that.
Yeah. I read one that was just like, I wish that, like, just don't do a half measure. Yeah. Right? Just, like, cut it completely.
Yeah.
And decide what what it is. And I read reviews that were like, I'm a newcomer and I feel fine playing this, right?
Right.
And I read reviews that were like, give me my choices and stuff. So, definitely contentious, but, like, I understand also, you know.
It's just a difficult position to have put yourself in the situation of being like, the studio that does this.
Yeah.
Right? As games have bloated and bloated and bloated and bloated.
Well, I mean, you know, they also are EA owned, which has not been great to them.
No.
Especially,
they don't feel great about it. That
yes.
Jason Schreier article was like, we feel like weirdos.
Yes. I think that EA has shifted a little bit.
Yes.
Since this time, but they've been under EA during the time when they were really, like, single-player games are dead.
Yeah.
Right? And they're, like, the single-player RPG makers that happen to be under EA.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of it comes from that, and maybe a BioWare that wasn't under EA would have managed to do things more successfully, or maybe not. Impossible to know. Right. Well, they certainly wouldn't have made Anthem, I don't think.
Yeah. It's just hard. It feels like a BioWare that's successful now would have to be making more games, like more smaller games more quickly. If you were, like, if you're still going to do this, like, your choices matter type thing that carries over, it just feels like you can't be making giant RPGs in 2024. It's just really hard. You need massive, massive resources to do that. And, like, they're obviously making choices to make this easier on themselves. I was reading, like, a Blue Sky thread, I think, with one of the developers, where he was talking about how, or maybe this is something separate, this is, like, related to this, the challenges of, like, the quantum characters, as they refer to them. So, like, obviously there are characters throughout the series where choices you make can lead to them dying, or not joining the party, or something, where it's, like, if you were to encounter them 2 games later, or you shouldn't encounter them 2 games later, or something.
Yeah.
And so they talk about how, you know, for the most part, what they call these quantum characters, they try not to include them later, because it just, like, nothing feels worse for the player than to encounter something that, like, is totally throws out the world that you've created for yourself. So it's better just not include them. But there are certain characters that they made the choice to do that with, or there are certain characters where, like, there were choices that were made that a small enough percentage of people would see that, like, there was something with, I won't pretend that I got enough into the lore with this, but with, like, a baby.
Yeah?
Like a baby born that should have been born with the soul of, like, something important.
Okay.
And it was like, this was what this thread was a little bit about. He was like, naturally players that did this would expect this to be, like, a world-changing thing.
Yeah.
But because, like, only 2% of players would get this, like, that's not something, we had to work really hard. And they, like, found some kind of way to, like, bring this back in a way that is a, like, notable moment of success for this, apparently, in the series. Again, didn't happen in this game, so you're gonna have to go research this yourself. But, then it's like, in some of the reviews and some of the talking about this, they're talking about, oh, it's clear that they've, like, made the choice in this game to try to create fewer of those characters, those quantum characters, right? Which on one hand simplifies things, on the other hand is like, well, are you making, like, less interesting choices, though, if nobody dies?
Sure.
So it's tricky. How do you set yourself up for success while still having storytelling freedom? And by tricky, I mean it's impossible.
Yeah. 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 Especially with, like, a rapidly changing leadership on your team.
Well, it's really the final frontier of video games, right? In some ways, like, I mean, there's no other genre that can, like, do this other than, like, choose your own adventure books, right? Where you can have your choices matter in that way. And so it does kind of suck that it's like, oh, but, like, actually that's impossible. Feels like there has to be some way to break through into that, because that's what everybody wants. But it's really freaking hard. So sorry, BioWare.
I mean, they're apparently, so, you know, I won't spoil anything, but the end of the Veilguard does wrap up, like, the sort of Inquisition cliffhanger in a way.
Yeah.
That's satisfying for some people, and maybe not for others. It's just any story.
Yep.
And they're working on a new Mass Effect game, apparently. I don't know if it will be a sequel to Andromeda. But they are kind of in a place now where they can start fresh with these series and then figure out what they want to do with them from there. So we will just have to see, basically. Also, we didn't really mention, you sort of mentioned offhandedly, but yeah, in each of these you create your character. It's not like
We love a character creator.
It's not like male shep, femme shep.
No.
You make your character, you design them. In this one, you can be non-binary, you can be explicitly trans, which comes up in lore in Dragon Age in certain ways, so you have actual like lore conversations about that.
Yeah.
This is why it got the because you can have like top surgery scars.
Yeah.
Which right?
Yeah.
That gets them.
Yeah.
They're like, top surgery scars. The wee woo alarm is going off. We must make 8 videos in 6 days. And then you pick, like, from 3 classes, which, again, just to speak from how divisive this game is, I read one review where that was like, Mage was so fun, I loved playing Mage, I've never enjoyed playing Mage before, and now I really loved it, and one review that was like, Mage sucks, only play Warrior or Rogue. So, there's that. Yeah. And then you pick your race as well, and you pick your sort of alignment or allegiance.
Yeah. Six houses.
That sort of affects your role going into the game, right? Your backstory, essentially. And that sort of shapes, and then you name them, of course. They're just called Rook. That's just like the Inquisitor's name is not the Inquisitor.
Right.
They're whatever you named them. Yeah. Rook's name's not Rook, it's whatever you named them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's that element to it as well.
Well, are we ready to mash?
Are we?
So I feel like here's the thing. This is what came up for me when we were talking about the lore of fighting games. I feel like there is something, like, nobody freaking wants this, right? So I'll just preface this with that. But I feel like you could do something with a side-scrolling beat-em-up type thing where, like, the lore is going to carry, like, your choices are going to carry over from game to game. I actually think a side-scroller, like a beat-em-up like that, is probably, like, a simple enough game, quote-unquote, to design, that you could, like, have some choice points that you could actually create a branching path. I'm talking about a side-scroller as created in, like, 1989, for context. 6 levels.
You know how many megabytes you still need to do that now?
I know. Hundreds, perhaps.
No, what do you mean, exactly?
I don't really know what I mean. I mean that, like, you have to make choices about who you beat up.
Okay.
And, like, if I have beaten up the wild wheels as opposed to the mad wheels, what's it called?
So just, like, a
Mad
branching
deer.
choice in a beat-em-up game?
Right, but then it follows you throughout the series. Carries over the choices you made.
Okay, so just a RPG that has beat-em-up combat.
But you have to port your save data.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I'd like for BioWare to make a beat 'em up. Is what I'm saying.
Maybe that's the next one, you know?
Cause yeah, I feel like the choiciness of it feels essential, but also the punchiness. You could also make a beat 'em up that's about, like, beating up people who write Metacritic reviews about games being too woke.
True.
Like, that feels like that could be satisfying.
Yeah. That probably wouldn't get you any death threats.
No. What are you talking about? Feels like a safe game to me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I have anything other than my, like, branching paths fighting series.
Like a fantasy beat 'em up?
Like Gauntlet? That's not a side-scroller, I know. But, like, yeah, I mean, a fantasy beat 'em up, sure.
Is Gauntlet a beat 'em up?
No, it's not. I know it's not.
No, I was really thinking about it. It's kind of like a... Is it like a Diablo-like?
Maybe? I'm thinking of Gauntlet Dark Legacy. Gauntlet Dark Legacy.
It has, like, an isometric perspective, that one, though, doesn't it?
Maybe it does, yeah, I don't... Whatever.
It
was not a good... I just said words.
But sure, like Gauntlet, but a beat 'em up. I don't know if there are many, like, fantasy, like, just punch 'em games, you know?
That's true. Okay. Maybe there's an opening in the market for that then. You're right.
Yeah. Unless you count, like, ghosts and goblins, I guess. But...
Yeah, I mean, you have a good character creator, too, probably. You could do your own, like, sprite editor.
Sure.
Be kind of neat.
I don't know... I guess if they were all, like...
You could do presets, but you could also have, like, go in and edit the sprites.
Yeah, I was just thinking of how that would work animation-wise. I guess if they were all, like, the same size.
Yeah.
Or if you had, like, a couple of body types to choose from,
Yeah.
that would work.
I think that would be it. And they'd map, like, head, arms, leg.
Yeah. Because just the pixels would have to line up.
Yeah.
Right?
That'd be pretty neat. Not enough games would let you make your own pixel art. Just saying.
I don't think it would... It'd be like those, Picross.
Yeah.
Face makers.
Yeah.
That level of customization, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think it'd be cool. Okay. Feel like this is doable.
Those are 2
Games. Absolutely.
that could certainly exist,
They certainly could.
I think.
A beat 'em up where you can romance people.
Yeah, you know, so many beat-up-ups are about, like, saving your loved one,
Yeah.
right? But what if you could romance your ninja friend?
Yeah. That'd be a great... Could you imagine if Final Fight was like, actually, Cody and Guy are together? They were on vacation together.
Listen, he went to jail for him, so, like,
God.
isn't that romance already?
Yeah, it is. Well, on that note, listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
Do you think that Cody and Guy should just get it together already? Do you feel like New York deserves Hagar as a mayor and not our current mayor? Do you wish that there was some way for games to carry over choices from game to game more than once without it becoming totally impossible to manage? Do you, I don't know, have experience working on something for 10 years and having it change many times throughout in frustrating ways?
Yeah.
If you have thoughts about this or anything else we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Blue Sky at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can read all about the show, check out the games in the hat, and read our blog, featuring Emma's thoughts on Arcane, plus long-running series, Clickbait Boyfriend, Split Screen, anime, EDs, OPs coming soon.
Coming soon. Probably, like, the first week of January.
That's pretty soon.
Yeah.
No. And lots more. But most importantly, if you can enjoy the show, you should subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts, online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Go on and subscribe to Talk This. It's Emma's side quest next week.
Is it? What are we doing next week?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a mystery episode next week. I don't know. I haven't decided. I think it should be your side quest. I think we should do.
Okay. All right.
Tune in. Emma and I'll talk about it after the show, and we'll decide.
Okay.
Because I have to think about my travel schedule.
Okay.
But Emma, in 2 weeks, what are we talking?
I mean, in 3 weeks, regardless.
Sorry, in 3 weeks.
Regardless of what we decide, these
One
will be in 3
of
weeks.
them will be Emma's side quest. One of them will be our year-end recap. But no matter what, in 3 weeks,
our old game is going to be Shovel Knight.
cool.
And our new game is going to be Slitterhead.
Woo! So look forward to that in 3 weeks. So that's it for this week's show. Emma, sign us off.
This week, I hope that you get to punch someone in the face.
That's all you got?